This week we shall be going through a game where neither player castled, rather they had their kings in the center throughout the game. The game was played in the Azerbaijan Championship in their capital of Azerbaijan, Baku, between Grandmasters Mahammad Muradli, who was playing with white pieces, against Shahriar Mamedyarov, who was playing with black pieces. Mamedyarov is one of the top Grandmasters of the world and the only player who has won the World Junior Championship twice in his career. So let's start the game. It is Muradli white, Mamedyarov black. Muradli started with d4, black played knight f6, c4, e6, and here white played knight f3, not allowing black the Nimzo-Indian defense, which is knight c3, bishop b4. So white declines the offer of Nimzo-Indian and goes knight f3 instead. And now Mamedyarov transposes the game back to Queen's Gambit declined. He played d5. Well, the Queen's Gambit decline arises after d4, d5, c4, e6. And if white plays knight f3, knight f6, we have the same position which arose in the game. Okay, now here white developed knight f3, knight c3, black continued bishop e7, and instead of bishop f4 or bishop g5, followed by e3 and kingside development, which is the normal Queen's Gambit, white played cd5. He exchanged the pawns, and this is called the Queen's Gambit exchange variation. The main idea behind exchange variation is white rules out all the variations associated with dc4 by black. So he fixes the pawn in the center, and also he opens the c line for his rook. After cd5, black took back e5, and white opted for bishop f4 instead of bishop g5, which is more common in this position. Bishop f4 places the bishop on a better diagonal than g5. He puts pressure on the queen side, but the move has a downside which will be highlighted by Mamedyarov. He went knight h5, he chased the bishop away. Well, we are advised not to move the same pieces multiple times in the opening without completing development. But in this position, black says, first move the bishop away from an active square, then I'll continue with my development. And instead of going back, well, the bishop can either go to g3, e5, or even g2. But instead of moving the bishop, white played another surprising move, and that is g3. White supported the bishop. Well, the bishop is actually more active than the knight, but white accepts black's offer to exchange the bishops. He does so on his own condition. He says that if you capture my bishop, I will take back with the pawn and open the g line for my rook. So this is white's idea behind g3. So we already have a very fighting start. Black played c6. Well, the move is preparing knight b d7. He can't play knight d7 at once because he will lose this pawn. So black first supports the d pawn, and white played e3. He wants to develop his bishop not from g2 because he wants to keep the g line open for his rook. So he wants to develop his bishop from d3, so he played e3. And now black first played bishop g4. White attacked the bishop, and black was happy to trade the bishop for the knight on f3, followed by trade the knight for the bishop on f4. So he took the bishop on f4, and now white, instead of the more natural looking move queen f4, he went for gf4 which is consistent with his previous move. So he had played g3 to take back with the g-pawn. Now when a pawn moves towards center, white has additional control of central square e5, as well as he has opened the g file for his rook. From black side, this is a double pawn, and a double pawn is definitely a weakness. So both sides have advantages as well as disadvantages in this position. Black played knight d7, white developed, and now black played a very instructive move. He played g6. Well, this tiny little pawn move actually restricts both this bishop as well as the rook. So this is a very instructive move which you should learn. In general, whenever we have positions where we have opposite colored bishop for both sides, here white has a light square bishop, black has a dark square bishop, it's advisable for us to place the pawns on the squares of opponent bishop. So black is placing the pawns on light square to neutralize white's bishop. Now white played f5, trying to get rid of his double pawns and also to attack on the king side. Black calmly plays knight f6. And here white should have exchanged the pawns, fg6, allowing black to open the h file against white's isolated h pawn. But even then, white will be having the g file for attack, and we would have a very interesting position. Instead, white started a faulty plan of attacking on the queen side. He played a3. Well, he has the semi-open c file in his hand, so he wants to play b4 followed by b5 and attack on the queen side. But he has already burned his bridges on the king side by opening up the g file. So now he is opening up the second front without stabilizing the king side. Black immediately played g5, not allowing white access to f6 square, f5 square. White played b4, and suddenly, well, white wants to attack on the queen side, but black played a brilliant move over here, and that is b5. He blocked the queen side completely. He preempted white's idea of playing b5 by playing b5, and now he's basically targeting the queen side, white's queen side, with his dark square bishop. White doesn't have a dark square bishop. So a3 b4 has turned out to be more of a weakness than attacking moves. Moreover, the king doesn't have shelter on either flank. Instead of a3, white could have gone long castles and connected the rooks. But now comes a time where white had to play king e2 to connect the rooks. So we have white's king in the center. It's risky, but white didn't have any other option. Castling on either side would have been more dangerous for the king. Well, white played king e2 and black immediately went a5. Now the rook and the bishop immediately combines to attack on the queen side, the weakness created by the pawn advances. Black is attacking the b4 pawn. White has to play ba5, rook a5. Black attacks the a3 pawn. So white has to go a4 to defend the pawn. And now black played another very nice move, queen to a8, pinning the a pawn. Note that white cannot take ab5 because the a1 rook is left with insufficient defense. Rook a1, queen a1, black is a rook up. So white played queen g3. Since the queen has left the d8 square, Now white wants to punish black by entering into black's position through this diagonal. Queen g3. Black went b4, immediately attacking the knight. The knight has to retreat. It went to b1. Now given time, this knight will come back from d2 and b3. So white is trying to somehow coordinate his pieces, especially his rooks. Now from this position onwards, we'll see black has so many opportunities of capturing the a pawn, but every time there is some trick and he cannot capture. Now if he captures the a4 pawn now, after rook a4, the rooks will be exchanged and white will play queen b8 check. Since black queen has left the queen side, queen b8 check, forcing black to go bishop d8, after which the queen will retreat to d6. And black's king is also quite weak. He cannot castle on the king side, so probably he has to go something like bishop e7, after which white can repeat the position by playing queen b8, and a draw would be a likely result. Therefore, black, who is already having some advantage in this position, he did not play rook a4, rather he played a very nice move, that is knight to e4. He is threatening the queen, and also when given chance, the knight would jump to c3, checking the king. Well, if white knight ever develops and relinquishes control of c3, black's knight will jump and sit on c3. So knight e4 is a nice square, nice move. If white exchanges the dangerous knight by taking bishop e4, that would leave this diagonal very weak, and black will be ready to make use of this diagonal. He will play queen a6 check, followed by queen d3. He will have the advantage. So here white played queen e5, attacking the h8 rook and the e4 knight. How will black defend? Black played king d7. So this is a move which mirrors white's move. White had played king e2 earlier to coordinate the rooks, and now king d7 supports the h8 rook with his queen, and suddenly black's pieces are quite well coordinated. The rook can switch to the queen side and continue black's attack. Okay, so in this position white played f6. He wants to vacate the f5 square for his pieces. Black played bishop d6. Now knight f6 is possible, but the attacking knight has retreated. So in this position white would go rook c1 and continue his pressure on the queen side. So this is why white played f6, to push back the knight for one move. But black played bishop d6 instead. Now white went queen f5 check. The king took shelter on c7. Both the kings are in the center. Both the kings are basically attacked by opponent's pieces. So let's see who survives. Here white played rook c1, a brilliant move. Basically he put the rook opposite to the king, and if given chance, white can capture on d5. Now at present the d5 pawn is supported with the rook, but if black takes rook a4, white would first exchange the rooks and then play queen d5, attacking the knight. When the knight moves back, white can either take the g5 pawn or f7 pawn. He would have an excellent position. So this was basically white's idea when he played rook c1. Black played the best move in this position, that is b3, threatening to fork both the rooks by playing b2 next. What would white do? If white escapes, if the rook escapes, gives up the c file, then the d pawn, the c pawn is no more pinned, white will not be able to take queen d5 after black takes rook a4. So rook a4, a possible line could be rook a4, the rook exchanged, and white would try to recover the pawn. White is a pawn down, so he will take on e4, take back the e4 pawn, but then the b3 pawn is quite well advanced. Black could go queen a2 check, king f3, queen c2, and black would have an excellent winning chances because of his pawn. The rook will soon join the attack on the queen side, and in the end game, black is having a clear advantage. So that is the reason why, well, rook g1 is not sufficient for equality. White sacrificed an exchange here by playing rook a3 instead. White defended against b2 threat by playing rook a3. Now black took on a3 with his bishop. White took back the bishop with the knight. White's logic is, by giving up the exchange, he has basically removed a very important bishop on d6. Let's see whether white gets compensation. In this position, black has to be very careful. He's an exchange up, but his king is still quite exposed. So if he takes on a4 now, white will play queen d5 check. First he will take queen d5 pawn, since the c6 pawn is pinned, and if black plays knight d6, he can play queen e5 with the idea of queen e7 check. Well, rook a3 doesn't work because, as we have seen, queen e7 check and queen d6, black's king is still quite exposed, and although it's an exchange down, white has sufficient attacking chances. Well, so in this position, after knight a3, after taking the exchange, black played knight d6 first, attacking white's queen and giving up the g5 pawn. Now black played a very nice move once again. Instead of taking the pawn on a4, first he played b2 to attack the rook. The point is, again rook a4 is not the best move. So for quite some time, black is unable to capture the a pawn. And remember, if black can capture the a pawn, it will help black to infiltrate into white's position. But he is unable to do so. If he takes rook a4 now, once again white will play queen e5, and the knight on a3 is immune because queen e7 check, and we have seen queen d6. Still white is in the game. So black first played b2, attacking the rook. The rook went up, keeping pressure upon the king and keeping the c pawn pinned. Here black played a very important move, that is, he moved his queen to b8. Queen b7 is also good, but what is not good is rook a4 once again. He cannot take rook a4 for so many moves. The reason is, once again we have familiar tactics or trick associated with queen e5. If black plays rook a3 now, white will play queen e7 check, king b6, rook b2 check first, followed by queen d6, and basically white is having a much better position. If black plays knight b5, and at this point black is a rook up, it seems black is going to win, but white has a brilliant resource and he can turn the tables. So you can pause the video now and find out the winning move for white in this position. There are some calculation involved, so take your time, pause the video for some time, and then match your solution with my commentary. Well, in this position, white can win by playing rook b5 check. Black has to retake or recapture with the pawn, after which queen c5 check. Surprisingly, white is a rook down and an exchange down, but the combination of queen and the bishop is so deadly that black is unable to escape the checks. Now, king has to go back. Well, black has to be careful because he should not allow the bishop check the king and enter the race. So, king b7. White first takes the d5 pawn to open this diagonal for the bishop. Now the bishop can have access to bishop e4 check later. If black goes king c8, white will play queen c5 check. And just to show you a sample variation, how white can win from this position. King b8. Now white plays queen d6, not queen b6, but queen d6 check. Now if the king comes to this square, b7, white can play bishop e4 check. If the king comes to c8, white can go bishop f5 check, forcing the king to go to b7 anyway. And then we have bishop e4 check. So the only move for black is to go king a7, but then the support of the rook with the queen is gone, and white can capture the rook. Queen a3 check. Now he is only an exchange down. And for the exchange, he already has 2 pawns. He will soon win the b5 pawn, and white will be 3 pawns up for an exchange. So here he could have played queen a8 winning, or he can play queen d6 check, followed by queen c5 check, followed by queen b5 with a check. Now he's 3 pawns for an exchange. So this is a winning material advantage for white. And after a move like say queen b7, we can happily exchange the queens and keep on pushing our pawns. So it's a long variation, but it simply showed the risks associated with centralized king in the middle game. Even though black had a winning position, he has to be very careful, otherwise he can slip into a loss. So he played queen b8 instead of capturing the a pawn. He played queen b8, white retreated his knight, and black's queen entered the position. Queen b4. Now black has started to attack. White went knight c3, and now the question is, can black promote the pawn? You can pause the video and find out the solution to the fact that b1 queen is actually a mistake. After b1, white will capture the queen with the knight, and if black recaptures, white can play rook c6 check, discovered attack. When black captures the rook, white will capture the queen. This is good for white. So, well, black has to be careful. He cannot promote immediately. First, he brought out the last piece in the game. So he completed his development in move number 30. It was a very complicated game, but once the rook enters the fray, now the scenario changes completely. Black goes into attack. The point is, can white play knight d5 check? Again, you may pause your video and work out a solution how black will win against this move. Knight d5 check. It looks good for white, but actually black is winning. The solution is rook d5, queen d5, and now black has the brilliant move that is queen to e1 check, forcing the king to come back so that black can promote with a check And after king e2, black can remove the c2 rook with a check, another queen sacrifice. So this is second queen sacrifice for black in a row. The point is that after the rook is not on c2, black can happily recapture the d5 with his pawn, and black is left with an extra rook. So this is how black would have won if white played knight d5 check. So once black's rook comes into play, all these tactics are possible now. Black went queen g1, he went into defense, and the moment he went into defense, there is no counter attack. Black is an exchange up. Black has an advanced passed pawn on b2. He has everything to win. Black played knight e4. Black is attacking. White knight retreated, and black captured the a pawn. White went queen g7, attacking the f7 pawn, one last attempt, and black played knight d6. Now in this position, white's pieces are on the defensive. The king, black's king, is safe enough, and white is also threatening queen d4 winning pawns. He's an exchange up, and his pawn is on the second rank, ready to promote. In this hopeless position, white decided to resign. What did we learn from this game? Well, if we keep our kings in the center, there are lots of tricks and traps and attacks and sacrifices which we have to negotiate. So it's much easier for us to castle early in the game, be safe, and only then attack our opponents. Thanks for watching. We shall meet again next week with another interesting video from latest games. Goodbye.